Okay, this is Jimmy Kane on Annex Studio, and we have the privilege of spending some time with Bob Daisley. For those of you who are not familiar with most of Bob's career, Bob, of course, played with Mongo Jerry, and if you're familiar with the Summertime hit, Bob was with him for quite a while, and then Bob's big break came with Rainbow, playing with Ronnie James Dio, Richie Blackmore, Cozy Powell, and then, of course, his time with Ozzy Osbourne, Randy Rhoads, Lee Kerslake, doing the monumental Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman albums. Then back over to Uriah Heep with Mick Box, Lee Kerslake again, time with Gary Moore, time in Black Sabbath, and many other projects. Hello, Bob.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, it's Jimmy calling from the United States. How are you?
Hi, Jim. How you going?
Doing great. Okay, Bob, I guess the first thing, that I'd like to talk about, even though, you're much more than just a bass player, but I'd like to start, with some questions about the instrument itself and your approach to it.
I first fell in love with the instrument, really, when I was about, I think I was about 13, and I was having guitar lessons just on a, little old beaten-up acoustic guitar in a class of about, 20, 25 pupils or so. And one of the weeks, it was a weekly thing, we'd just go along for a 1-hour lesson each week in a little scouts hall. And one of the weeks the teacher decided to have a band on, because the scouts hall had a little stage at the end of it, and he put this band on to show us the various roles that different instruments play. And this was in the days of probably more instrumental music, like the Ventures and the Shadows and the Chantays and all that sort of stuff, So they just played a couple of instrumentals for us, There was it was an electric band, so that was...
Was that your first... I'm sorry, was that your first interest into performing the music? I mean, was the surf rock, or was it the Beatle thing, Bob?
In 1963, and I was in Australia still then, the Beatles were just starting to break big in England, so they hadn't reached, the worldwide market. I know my sister had some Beatles records, but I think that was later, 64.
I think you're correct.
Yeah. So no, there were bands around at that time that were doing the sort of like the 60s pop rock stuff. But just seeing the electric bass guitar and feeling the warmth of it and the strength and the backbone of the music, I thought, God, that's what I want to do. Because I was playing guitar at the time, but I just loved the feel and the sound and the warmth and the strength of the instrument. And I remember going home to my mum and saying, I don't think I want to play guitar anymore. I want to get a bass. I want to play bass. And there was, I was in a little high school band at the time, because a few of us at the same school were having various lessons. There was a drummer and another guitarist and someone who sang a little bit, and I thought this would be perfect. I could be the bass player in the band, and we got the band together. Because I think first of all we used to just go around each other's houses and just sort of play together. Oh, I know this chord. Oh, really? Oh, I know that chord, and we'd learn things off each other. And then when I decided to play bass, I thought, oh, good, that'll complete the band. I can be the bass player.
Did your mom know what a bass was when you approached her about it, Bob?
Yeah, I think she did. She was always very, very keen for me to pursue music, and she was always very encouraging to me. And she said, well, if that's what you want to do, and because she could see I had the fire in me, I wanted to do it. I was serious about it.
That's beautiful.
A lot of I went into the city with my mum, and we went to a music shop in the city, and I got a little 20-watt practice amp and a little Futurama bass, and away I went, wearing out my sister's record.
Bob, do you still have the bass?
No, I wish I did, but you know, being the age I was at the time, when I wanted to sort of upgrade a bit later, you know, which was probably when I was about 15, I had to either I think I sold it privately instead of trading it in because I got a bit more. Sold it and then went and got another one. But I wish I had that first one.
Oh, I know.
Had a lot of memories in it,
I think that's every musician's lament. You know, we all do what you did. You know, we all.
Oh yeah, and everybody's got stories of things I wish I'd never done or things I wish I'd kept and you know didn't get rid of.
Well, who knows? Maybe it will come back to you one day. You never know, Bob. You know. But you know, it's a thing. You know that I see all the time. You know, in the work that I do with the students at the school. And I often tell parents, I say, you know, I don't care how talented a student is, if he doesn't have the support of the parents behind him, and whether that's
right.
The kid doesn't have a chance.
Ingredient.
Yeah, so you're very fortunate, you know, that your mom was behind you.
Yeah, well, see, my mom was always a bit very accurately psychic, you know, throughout my life. And as she got older, it got more and more intense and she was more and more accurate. But I remember when I was a very young age, my mum just asked me, she used to say to me, if you played a musical instrument, what would you play? And that was when I was sort of like 6, 7 and 8, you know, and I hadn't even really thought about it.
Right.
Although, before I could even talk properly, I think I was about, I don't know, before I was 2, I was asking for a drum for Christmas.
Well, maybe, you know, maybe she could see the vision, but it wasn't perfectly clear. So maybe, you know, that she had to investigate from you, like, what your feeling was. Maybe.
Well, how it all came about was, when I was about 13, we had a door-to-door salesman turn up at the front door, and my mum answered the door, and he said, is there anyone in the household that would like to learn to play a musical instrument? And my mum said, well, I don't know, I'll ask my son. And I went to the front door and I said, well, I like the idea of learning guitar, but I'm not so sure about learning to read the dots and doing it sort of like academically.
Right.
You know? I just had the feel of wanting to do it from the heart rather than from books, you know.
Well, that's beautiful.
Although there's nothing wrong with learning the rudiments
of
music and the theory of music, and it really does come in handy. You know, I had a bit, but not a lot, you know.
Right.
I think it was Louis Armstrong when they asked him in one of his interviews if he'd had any formal training, and he said, yeah, I had some, but not enough to fuck me up.